my blissful self. Today, let us continue to know something more about deep sleep. So, when we go to deep sleep, we are not in a position to experience these subtle bodies or the bright light and anahata sounds. Anahata means without any gap, without any interval. Like that. One, there is gap. Two, there is gap. Not like that. Anahata. So when we go to sleep, we don't experience the anahata sounds or the bright light or the unmixed bliss. But one who is going to Samadhi, he experiences the bright light and the anahata sound and unmixed bliss. So this is the difference between deep sleep and Samadhi. So when we go to deep sleep, so what exactly we do is, we go to deep sleep to be relieved from tiresomeness and weariness of sensual enjoyment temporarily and naturally. But one is not in a position to know or understand that the sensual enjoyment results in tiresomeness and weariness. While going to Samadhi, one is in a position to be relieved from the tiresomeness and weariness of sensual enjoyment permanently and by consciousness. While going to Samadhi, one thinks that the sense enjoyment ends in tiresomeness and weariness. So during deep sleep, our mind becomes motionless. That means our mind becomes calm through ignorance. But in Samadhi, our mind becomes calm through discrimination and dispassion. And the deep sleep is got according to one's own prarabdha actions. But Samadhi can only be attained through practice. The ordinary beings or the ignorant people go to deep sleep to be relieved from the tiresomeness and weariness of sense enjoyment. But the so-called, the realized souls, to be relieved from tiresomeness and weariness, they go to deep sleep, or they go to Samadhi to be relieved from the tiresomeness and weariness of the sense enjoyment. So, if we go to deep sleep, the so-called karmas, that is Sanchita karma and the Agami karma and Prarabdha karma, these actions cannot be destroyed in deep sleep. But in Samadhi, it destroys all the actions, Sanchita actions, Agami actions, and Prarabdha actions. During deep sleep, one is subsided in ignorance by thinking that the likes and dislikes are no givers of bliss through discrimination. When we go to deep sleep, so one is subsided in ignorance, and the likes and dislikes of the sensory objects have not been destroyed, but they are subsided. They have not been destroyed through discrimination. But while going to Samadhi, what happens therein is the realized soul has stood still in his real self. By removing the likes and dislikes through discrimination and dispassion, so that the likes and dislikes, they are givers of misery, but in deep sleep they have not been removed. So in deep sleep, the individual soul is merged, as it were, in one's own true self. Not merged, as it were, Vandadante, like that. Vandagilla. But in Samadhi, the individual soul is merged in one's own true self. He becomes one with his true self. So that is the difference between deep sleep and Samadhi. And again, so while going to sleep, there is the soothing sensation. Sundhu antar. Sundhu. Soothing sensation or Sundhu. So while going to sleep, one will experience a soothing sensation like this. There is the soothing sensation, and this soothing sensation deepens, and it becomes a dhyana, dharana, and lastly, it becomes deep sleep. But while going to jnana samadhi, one attains the thread of bliss. That is the Ananda Sutra. He attains the thread of bliss, and then it becomes, or it deepens, and it deepens and becomes a dhyana and dharana, and lastly, it ends in samadhi. So while going into deep sleep, he goes into deep sleep through the thread of ignorance. Maraveya Sutra, Ajnanada Sutra. But while going to Samadhi, there is the thread of bliss. The thread of bliss attained through discrimination, and he stands still in one's own true self. While going to sleep, or if one is tired and wearied, he can get deep sleep. But that cannot be done in case of the samadhi. If at all one has to attain samadhi, he has to attain it through discrimination and dispassion. And he has to meditate on its true self. Then only he can attain jnana samadhi. But it is not so in case of deep sleep. When we awaken from deep sleep, when we come to the waking state from deep sleep, so there is no understanding that the waking state is real and blissful. But when we awaken from samadhi, so there is the understanding that the waking, dream, and deep sleep states are unreal and miserable. But when we awaken from deep sleep, the waking state and the dream and deep sleep states are real and blissful. So that is the difference. When we go to deep sleep, the misery of the waking, dream, and deep sleep states cannot be removed. The misery of waking, of dream, and deep sleep cannot be removed by simply going into deep sleep. But if one attains the jnana samadhi, so the misery of waking, dream, and deep sleep states have been completely removed. So that is the difference. So if we go to deep sleep, we can enjoy bliss through ignorance. But if we go to samadhi, we can enjoy bliss by consciousness. So that is the exact difference. In a deep sleep, there is no knowledge of our one's true self. But in samadhi, one has the firm knowledge of one's own true self. In deep sleep, there is the covering of ignorance. And that is how, when he is in deep sleep, so the head, the hands, the legs have been fallen haphazardly. because there is no consciousness. Due to ignorance, the head, the hands, the legs have been fallen haphazardly. But in a Jnana Samadhi, as there is consciousness, the head, the hands, and the legs have not been fallen haphazardly. The deep sleep state is the state of insentience. That means jada. The deep sleep state is the state of insentience and ignorance. But samadhi is the state of knowledge and consciousness. So, this is all about the difference between deep sleep and samadhi. And by this, I end my talk.